Well, good afternoon. My name is Maynard, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Washington Labs Academy webinar series. We hope it's informative. We have developed this monthly International Approvals webinar series to deal with some of the technical and administrative issues that our customers face when obtaining global marketplace product approvals for electronics and electrical devices. We recognize that compliance engineering and certification challenges can be complex, and we're always looking for ways to support our customers. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. First, I hope everyone, which says International Compliance. Microphone to keep the meeting on. A recording of the presentation is underway and will be sent to all attendees and all those that register for reviewing or viewing at a later time. You may select the view left-hand corner of your WebEx screen and full screen, and then you can use the escape key to return to the normal view. We encourage questions during the presentation. You can submit a question by enabling the chat or Q&A icon located at the top or side of the screen. We will go through all the questions at the end as time permits, or maybe get back in touch with you later if we don't have time to go through them all. We'd like to hear from you. You can see the contact information here at the end of the presentation. Please reach to academy@wll.com or to my speaker's information. The presentation will take it for questions at the end. Well, I want to thank y'all for joining me on this April 12th date, and I work at Washington Labs, heading up their training, and Washington Labs Academy. I also have a dual role at American Certification Body for Business Development. And I've been working in compliance engineering for a while, including 20 years spent at Dell as a compliance engineer with RF, EMC, product safety, and all those other fun topics. And also very active in IEEE, and highly recommend it to any compliance engineer, especially the Electromagnetic Compatibility Society and the Product Safety Engineering Society as good sources for this. And I'll include some contact information for those at the end. I do want to give credit where I've got my demographic information on the countries, including economic information, population, technology infrastructure. It's all coming from the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency website called the World Factbook. It's public domain information as long as I give them credit for it. And so that's what I'm doing with this page here. The countries, see what the markets are like, especially if you're a smaller company. So North America, from north down to the south, start off with Canada, go through their EMC, Radio Spectrum Authority, and then product safety, and then we'll do the same for U.S. and Mexico. So here's the places we're talking about here. In compliance, we're going to go over the Innovation Science Economic Development Agency first. That is the one that replaced Industry Canada as their EMC and Spectrum Authority for Canada. Very similar to U.S., there's a lot of mutual recognition agreements in place with the FCC and ISED, so in a lot of cases their requirements are identical, but you need to be aware of the differences and make sure that you're doing your test reports and certifications in such a way that's going to be covered for both these countries. And product safety is covered under a mutual recognition agreement with the U.S. for a long time with the OSHA NERDL program. We'll go into more detail. And using the Canada's examples, and we won't go over it as in-depth on the U.S. part. So starting with Canada, our friends to the north, and it's the largest undefended border in the world. We've been strong allies and trading partners with each other for a long time, a couple hundred years, and a lot of trade goes back and forth. As far as population goes, they're not that big, but you notice their GDP per person parity is outsized with the 38th largest population, yet their GDP is ranked 18th, which shows they're very productive economically. They export, ranked 12th in the world. Their imports are 10th in the world, so it's a very good source for products. Mobile cellular, a little less than average at 42nd in the world, but the internet usage is higher than average. And based on their 38th population, it shows you they're very well adapted to the internet technologies that are out there and available for both work and private use. So let's look at innovation, science, and economic, which I have to look up every time because I've for years so used to calling industry Canada, but it's ISED. If you're seeing IC, maybe indication replaced with something more current. In a lot of cases, they just took the existing IC regulations and requirements and just adapted them to ISED. In other cases, they have been updated. And so they're basically like the U.S. FCC, looking at the radio spectrum, also the the things that can impact on it, like EMC and EMI. So the Spectrum Management Telecommunications Division of ISED is got a website out there with really good information. You can go out there and look at the RSS radio standard specifications and requirements are. So they've got for ITE equipment, which a lot of you are producing and certifying. So the standard with ICS 003 now been updated with the ISED version. And they say very similar market surveillance and auditing requirements, just like the FCC. They're looking to make sure that their frequency spectrum in their country is regulated, and that you're not trampling on emergency frequencies, police or fire or ambulance services, and military communication protected. They've got a very similar thing going on, and also I am going to mention this later, but there's the FCC TCB program also includes the alliances with the other agencies such as ISED, and it's actually going on the spring. They have a spring and fall workshop. I'll give some more information on that later, but it's going on this week, so I imagine people that are already members of that are probably maybe attending that. It goes on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in April and October every year with the latest updates. FCC comes and gives updates, and so does ISED, sends a couple of representatives, engineers to give the latest. And this is a radio standards procedure. They're going to be devices. So to get the approvals, you need to go through a ready. The one just like the TCB program in the U.S. ISED has the certification body program. There's all kinds of companies out there. Most of them are attending the workshop this week, and they're the ones that have been on. May or may not know the FCC. A year or two ago, finally outsourced almost virtually everything, over 99% of the testing to the TCBs, and Canada is in the same kind of direction where they've got these certification bodies doing all the testing and certification reporting and being authorized to do that. Similar to the FCC with the certification number has to be on there, like with the company or the certification identifier. And TTE equipment, hardwired mainline phone equipment has got to be covered under the requirements of the Telecommunications Act. Anything that connects to the infrastructure, they want to make sure you're not going to bring down the telephone infrastructure or do anything harmful to other users on it. And you can download the procedures for doing this from their website. There's some links I'll be given at the end of this. It also has wireless interface, and you've also got to submit for that. So there'll be two applications, one for the hardware a fax machine that has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capabilities, you'd have to do 2 submittals for this. They can go in together, but they'll be covered by the separate departments in reviewing them. And the similar marking on the hardwired equipment as for the wireless. They do have SAR requirements, pretty much just mirror the FCC RF frequencies given off by devices that are in close proximity to human use. Limits, stricter limits for things that might be used by children, which is virtually any smartphone nowadays. I've got a 2-year-old grandson that uses the iPhone better than I do, so you know that these are out there, and you've got to make sure that you're restricting those to levels that are ordained by these agencies as being below harmful effects levels. You see, limits are pretty much identical to the FCC, except they're using metric in some cases where we're using the English system. And so if you're familiar with the FCC program, you're going to be real easy to adapt to the Canadian SAR requirements. So they have implemented these changes with the increased limits on the different frequencies. For go through CSA as an example, because now with the mutual recognition agreement for ocean nurdles with those nationally recognized test labs, which started out with U.S. and Canada, and now Mexico has started to adopt it for certain categories on that program. But in general, if you're going to a product safety agency, you're going to be going through ordained labs, because that way you get the one certification. It is still possible just to get country specific, but it's going to be the same test, the same cost basically. So you might as well go ahead and get cleared for being able to ship to all these North American countries, Canada, U.S., and Mexico. So the same U.S. standards are same as Canadian standards, with some differences for voltages and frequencies, depending on the application. They're all based on the international standards, IEEE standards, and just have their country deviations in place. They do have different certification programs if you're going there. So it's model certification, which is certified by model. You're going to send in for to CSA in this case, or some other. Witness testing is when they come into your facility to see all the high pot and low voltage tests and everything else that you've got to do for your particular product, and make sure it conforms to the standards. Supervised manufacturers testing, similar, but they're going to come in there and witness it. And then, but you have to get qualified in supervised manufacturers testing. Facility first authorized, and then they're going to do periodic examinations of it. Category program is so that you can do your own testing at your own facility, and it's just got to make sure that they're up to snuff. You've got qualified people to do all that testing. Certification process, you're going to get a project reference number. This is true for almost any product safety agency you're going to go to. And if you haven't worked with them before, you're going to have to get the authorization form set up, and all the non-disclosure paperwork. That they're not going to disclose their information to anybody, your information, and they're going to keep it confidential while it's being tested. And so you can be assured of that, and also that you're going to conform to their standards and not try to hide anything from them. And they're going to get product samples, and if it is a large scale, maybe a 1 or 2 off type thing, they can do on-site inspections. It's a little bit more expensive and time consuming, but it depends on what your products are. If manufacturing equipment, you might have to go that route, but most people will be able to send in samples. using a lab that's part of the CB scheme or have those standardized reports. And once they've got all the paperwork and the reports and the products, then they can proceed with reviewing everything, testing it, making sure it meets the standard. And you'll be able to use that as proof of compliance for the product safety part. And that, along with the IEEE Canadian approvals, will get, depending on what specific requirements are for that. It may have some. It's a radio. It's going to have required IEEE approval. Probably pretty familiar with this, since most of you in our audience today are from the U.S. Third largest population, third largest exporter in the world, and the #1 importer in the world. So we're really dependent on those things coming from other countries. Mobile cellular, third in the world. Sorry, that should be fourth in the world. If you third in the world if you don't count EU. If you count the individual countries in the European Union, I go back and forth on whether I think they should be lumped as a group. But they are an economic powerhouse, and according to the CIA website, they're listed as a group. And so if you're looking at cellular infrastructure and usage in European Union as a whole, all the 30-something member countries, then that's the ranking. And then the internet users, just a little bit switch up between EU and India. The EU a little bit more infrastructure in there, but China's still #1 in both of those categories. So they're a very good market for a lot of wireless and technology products. So we go at FCC, a little bit of regulatory backgrounds, some of the TCV program and some of the resources available there, and then the KDB, or Knowledge Database of the FCC, which is very useful, some test procedures, and we'll mention the OSHA DIRTL program for product safety again, but not go into as much detail as we just did for CSA for Canada. By the way, you don't have to use CSA if you're going to Canada. You can use any authorized OSHA DIRTL, and I think that will be spelled out a little bit more on the OSHA National Recognized Test Lab website, where they list all the labs. As long as they're recognized for whatever your particular product category is, they can do it. These are some of the major regulations covering different types of radio. Probably familiar with Part 15 if you're doing ITE equipment, Part 18 for intentional transmitters and stuff, and they've got different categories. If you've got ships, you're using Part 80. Satellites, Part 25. So it depends on what the product, the category is. If you're on a plane, you're using Part 87. So it just depends on what the category your product is. And so the FCC is enacted and authorized by Congress. It is a bureaucracy, but they've been doing a lot of great work over the past couple of decades of getting it more streamlined with the government industry program called the program the FCC has, and we'll be going through that throughout this look at the FCC today. So there's verification testing, where you're going to test the FCC limits and maintain records, verify compliance. You don't have to report it. And this is for categories that have allowed that. Now with the TCB program in place, you've got authorization that has to be done, and those are going to be under declaration of conformity. And it's got to be in an accredited lab with a recognition agreement. But as we've seen with China, that's not necessarily always the case. They were trying to force China into becoming a signatory on the MRA agreement with the U.S. That hasn't happened, but they are making exceptions for China labs at the moment, so they kind of back down on that one. So I don't know if that's going to change anytime in the future, but that's something to keep an eye on. So for new equipment certification, you have to have your exhibits, which is basic test reports and the pictures and the bill of material statement on how it's used and the features of it. And you get equipment authorization grant from the FCC. As I mentioned, that's the cases. Most of these approvals are coming from the FCC, and those are coming from the which are the TCBs you'll hear referred to a lot, and those are granted directly by them on behalf of the FCC. Work as a TCB and issue these grants. So they're going to make sure that they've got the right information, that the public can get the access to the information. They're going to verify that those products, or if they continue to be sold on the market, are staying in compliance by periodically checking and you know, the product. They may order a product sample, or they may look at a particular product and make sure that they've got all the features they're supposed to have in place, and that they're still within the limits that they're supposed to be within. So diving a little bit more into the TCB, Telecommunications Certification Body Program, and the TCB Council. If you're not familiar with it, as I mentioned, this would be some more, and that's where they're normally been held. In the past, they did go to San Diego, so other places, but for right now, it's been in Baltimore, with the FCC not being able to travel much out of the local area of Washington, D.C. And so the purpose is, as I mentioned, it's industry government cooperative, so we can sit down with the FCC and with the TCB themselves, and also any shareholders. That can be, you know, companies. When I was at Dell, we would attend because we were very interested in these regulations and finding out what was up. And it's just, it works out pretty well having this back and forth, you know, with all the different politics that go on with the different agencies, to be able to have a meeting of the mind. The engineers from the FCC can meet with the engineers from the industry and work through these things and figure out and try to get things set up so that they do, and share this information through the FCC website and TCB website, so everybody's working from the same level playing field. If you go to the TCB website, I'm going to show you a little bit later. I'm not going to go through it at the moment, but I'll provide the link there and see their from the About Us tabs, you know, how they're set and why they're set up. But it's basically for this reason of information sharing with industry and government, make sure that we're putting, the manufacturers are putting out equipment that's within compliance and not causing interference, and making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do as far as due diligence. And here's some of the things that come there: code of practices. You know, we're trying to make sure that we're being engineering basis, make sure we're following the right standards, testing them the right ways, our labs are authorized, and that we're reporting errors. We're not trying to hide stuff from the public or from the FCC. So I mentioned, you interested party can join. Usually companies join, and then your employees can be a member without any additional cost for the company. TCBs are considered the full members. Everyone else is considered an associate member, but everybody can attend. If you go to the TCB website, you can see that. The TCBcouncil.com is the website. You just enter in TCB.com. It's some other acronym. It's not us, but not them anyway. You know, there's some of the members, you know, test lab manufacturers, accreditors, consultants, and like A2LA accreditors are there. NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology from the U.S. government, is there, and they're the ones that oversee the FCC TCB program. So really a good chance to talk to these people that are actually implementing these laws and requirements, and understanding the reasoning behind them, and you can have some influence and contacts that can help you out. Calls are not every month, but most months, where they'll talk about the latest upcoming things, issues the FCC seeing with TCB applications, to try to, you know, if they're seeing the same problem over and over, to get that information out there so people can correct their mistake and work through any issues that may crop up from time to time. Here are some links for you. Mention the FCC homepage is not probably going to get where you go. You're probably going to be more interested in the equipment authorization system, the knowledge database, the telecom certification body site, and then down at the bottom I've given you the TCB Council website, where you can also get a lot of information both about the FCC and the TCB program and membership in the TCB Council. look over the knowledge database. The reason it was created was it's not to replace the rules and the federal regulations that are published, but to help provide guidance on them. They are guidance documents. If there's any dispute between what the knowledge database says and what the actual regulation says, the regulation always wins. So you gotta, it's just intended as an explanatory document to help clarify things. And if there's any confusion, they'll put out a clarification or some other kind of publication to say what the intent of the particular requirement or edict is, and so that everybody can understand how to follow it. So here's the link to the database, knowledge database, and you can see over 200 active KDBs out there. You can also look at the ones that have been deleted or obsoleted. But for historical purposes, and you know, if you're interested in looking at those kind of things, you can go out there and look by category. You can see here the application administrative guidance. So if this is your first application, you might want to go out there and see what common problems are, common mistakes people make. You know, application technical guidance will give you information on what the reports should be, and you know, labeling information. So any of these categories, and then there's some that aren't categorized, but might be other issues that you run into. So it's a good place to start from. But it's best if they know there's already answer in KDB that they're going to give you a curt reply, say go to the KDB and look it up, because you know, like every other government agency, we're not trying anymore to do all this, which is one reason they outsourced all the testing. So there are times at a premium, and if it's a question they've already answered, but with the KDB, that's the resource they want you to use first. So before you ask them a question, your fellow TCB council members or other people, they've got a little search engine. You can put in things. It's not the if you play around with it, you know, if you put in Wi-Fi, you may need to do Y with the -fi, or you're trying to find. It doesn't always discriminate adequately enough. Main page looks like this. It's got some drop-down menus. You can look in and get more information. They're posted on the FCC website when they're released, and you can receive monthly notifications by signing up on their website. And in some cases, the TCB Council will send out updates if something, you know, urgent or something we've been waiting on comes out. And so that's another good reason to join TCB Council. Here's a web link for the equipment authorization. You can go out and look at your applications, the status, and all those kinds of information. For product safety, as mentioned, you know, U.S., Canada, Mexico have this NERDL program, Nationally Recognized Test Lab, administrated by U.S. Occupational Health and Safety Administration, and there's a landing page for it there. You can also frequently ask questions about NERDLs, and then this is a listing of NERDLs, is listing of all the authorized NERDL labs that you can go to get this product safety testing done. Make sure when you're looking at these labs that if you've got IT equipment, you got to make they're authorized to do the IT equipment product safety testing. Under 6950 or the upcoming 638-1 hazard-based safety engineering standard. Then for Mexico, so they've got 11th largest population in the world. GDP is right in line with the population. They're 13th largest exporter, 14th largest importer. Mobile cellular 15th. Their internet usage is higher than their population indicates. So they've got a lot of internet users out there using this technology, both work and private use. They are a growing manufacturing economy. More and more of their economy is being based on manufacturing. So that is some good thing. They've got some political infrastructure issues that they need to resolve, and hopefully they're working on it. And NAFTA has been a real driver of trade with Canada, U.S., and Mexico, and I expect to see more of that going on. So about 5 years ago, the IFT agency was created to replace COFITEL, This is a common practice in Latin America that I've seen, in South American countries, and where they'll go in and decide that a agency is too bloated or has too much corruption, and they'll just outright replace it with entirely new body with entirely new faces. And that's what happened with Cofitel. Replaced by, in some places I've seen it abbreviated Infitel, just because I guess they want to make it similar to the Cofitel, but it's a Federal Institute of Telecommunications, and then they've got non-official standard for safety. Yeah, so first we're going to take a look at the IFT, which is their wireless telecom agency, wireless and telecom. So as I mentioned, about 5 years ago, in September 2013, it changed over. There was a little bit of confusion again, but everything's pretty much been ironed out. And it takes mandatory approvals for different types of equipment. It requires samples for local testing, although there are some exceptions as they've started to adopt the Ocean Hurdle program for certain categories. So anything that's telecom or wireless is going to have to get this approval. And, they took over the Cofitel agency and they took over their standards. They've gradually been replacing them all with IFT versions. Some cases they're identical, other cases they've been updated. They don't publish official standards in English, so that's why it's really good to have Mexico or Spanish fluent partner that can read the regulations, understand exactly what they're asking for and need. There is some local testing required for a lot of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or normal type stuff. Cellular stuff, cell phone stuff isn't usually required. Some certain cases they'll accept FCC or EU test reports. They do require a local representative, local certificate holder. So this is, if your company has an office in Mexico, it will be that office. If you don't have a presence there, you can hire someone to serve as your authorized local representative. You have to give them a attorney's letter of authorization so that they can act on behalf of your company in Mexico. They want somebody to go to if there's a need for a product recall or some other issue with the products coming into the country. And they have to be registered with the Typically takes about 2 weeks for a report to be issued, and there's a bunch of labs available there. And they have 12 business days as the official review period, but they usually take less than that. That would be, about 2.5 weeks is 12 business days, so they usually do it in less than 2 weeks. Start to finish, you expect about 9 weeks or 45 business days. They don't require factory inspections. They do require a cert number, but for your inspectors and border, inspection stuff, it's best if they have IFT, so they don't have to figure it. You don't want to rely on the customs inspectors to have to figure out what's the right number. Somewhere on your label, it's got 50 other marks on it. Usually good for a year. Can be renewed annually. You can make application permanent review, permanent approval depending on the category of equipment. Best to submit it, I'd say 6 weeks prior to expiration is to be safe, because you don't want to, if your certificate expires and you can no longer ship your product into Mexico, do that. Same type of required documents that you would expect for any wireless agency, spectrum agency. A block diagram, FCC grant report, or the particular report you get done in Mexico. Local import information, who's bringing it in, who your local representative is, product photos, regulatory label, drawing or mock-up, schematic of the product, technical brochure saying what, basically theory of operation, what this product does and what its capabilities are, and the user manual in Spanish. Make sure it's in the Mexican dialect Spanish, not Castilian Spanish, which is used in Spain. And sample required if the non-product safety requirements apply to your category of equipment. So for IFT equipment, that's probably good. I mean, IT equipment, computer equipment, that's probably required. Do have label marking, also require marking on the packaging. This is sample drawing, and make sure you're using the latest artwork. Test laboratories have to be located in Mexico, except for the exceptions we're going to talk about for certain categories that can use in ERDL labs. And they can only be obtained by your authorized local representative for those certificates, and that's another reason you need a local rep in Mexico. There are non-standards versus NMX standards, and those are voluntary standards. So depending on your product, the voluntary standard might be something you get if your government agency is procuring it, or a large corporation wants them and wants that assurance that their products are going to be safe. Anything that requires non-standard, that's the requirement. That's mandatory. You don't have a choice on it. You got to get the safety approval. And you can go and download these NOMS, the norms, the product safety standards from the website I've given you out here, where it says free of charge. However, those are in Spanish. So make sure that you've got somebody fluent in Spanish if they're going to interpret those for you. As I mentioned, they don't publish other standards in any other language but Spanish. So starting in 2010, there were some bumps along the way, but they announced they were going to have non-equivalence with NERDL, meaning they would accept NERDL certificates. This nationally recognized test lab from OSHA recognized certification. They started off with the 60065 standard and the 60335, so the audio video, the consumer appliances, and then the 6950 for ITE. And so if you've got products in other categories, they may have been on path to be adopted. You'll need to check with your local expert on Mexico's to make sure your product is covered under one of these, and then you can get one certification that will cover Canada, US, and Mexico. So in general, I know we didn't go real deep in a lot of things, but I provided you with a bunch of links, so hopefully you can do some investigation yourself. But later on this year or next year, we'll be going into more detailed looks at each of these countries individually. But I did want to get some information out there on them. So make sure you're looking product the requirements for your specific category. Don't assume because you've got a piece of IT equipment or computer equipment that it's just going to fall into the generic IT requirements. If you've got, depending on how many wireless devices you got packed in there and what all the different levels are, you may have an issue with it. Needs some local expertise. Make sure you've got, in addition to your local representative, this act on behalf of the country, logistics partner for shipping in Mexico is very crucial. Not so much for Canada, but just make sure you've got somebody who can get that stuff through customs. If they need to, like logistics partner, if your NERDL certs and get them to the customs agency wherever they're going into Mexico at, whether through ship or over the border, to make sure those things pass through customs and get sent to their your distributors and resellers in a timely. Not a lot of cooperation between the different ministries and agencies. For a lot for with the U.S. and Canada, as mentioned, but not so much with Mexico and the U.S. and Canadian governments. So make sure that you're sure what the requirements are, and don't just assume because it meets requirements in U.S. it's going to meet the same requirements for Canada and Mexico. So let me look at the questions we received today. Looks like we got a copy of slides. Oh, okay, so let's go back up the top. Conformity, that does apply to the FCC. I assume that's a question you're asking there. So there are certain categories of equipment that you can do that on. It'll be for the verification products, not for the stuff that needs a TCB approval, like a wireless transmitter or some other type of device like that. In Mexico, I have questions. The manual has to be in Spanish or just safety warnings. The manual does have to be in Spanish. There are some exceptions if it has to be professionally installed for and done like a cell tower for broadband cell phone to a telephone switching terminal or something like that. It can be in English only. But if it's going to consumer, it's consumer device, IEEE, most products are going to require a Spanish language document. And let's see what else we got. Yeah, there will be a copy of the website sent out when the link is sent out to the recording of it. And that'll, somebody had a question about some of the new rules for self-declaration conformity. As I mentioned, the TCB is going on this week, and a couple of my co-workers, engineers from American Certification Body, Washington Labs, are attending, and they're going to be bringing back the and ISED, so I'm going to be sharing some of that, so I'll make sure that we include that information in the slide deck that's sent out. I'll add it in as additional information at the end of the presentation you're seeing today. And okay, and on the talk a little bit more Chinese labs and FCC. So a year ago, there was supposed to be, or it may have been 2 years ago now, the FCC or the U.S. government was trying to force the China to become a mutual recognition agreement signatory with the FCC for the TCB program, like Taiwan does and Japan has done, so that we can have mutual recognition of each other's test report. From our labs, we can test for Japan MIC requirements or Taiwan BSMI requirements, and they will accept it in Taiwan or Japan, just like we'll accept the results in the U.S. Well, China refused to sign the MRA, and so at the last minute, I mean, the FCC doesn't make these decisions on their own. They're mandated by Congress what to do, and so they backed off this requirement that they were going to not allow testing from any labs that were non-MRA signatory countries like China. But they backed off that, and for now those are being allowed. So, but it is something to monitor. As I mentioned, I don't think there's a lot of activity on it at the moment, but I may find out, from the presentations I get from the people attending this week. If there's any change, as I mentioned, I'll include that additional information within the presentation. And let's see, we got, may have some questions on the Q&A. No, there's none there. Oh, wait, here's one. Okay, let me look at this here. For a company based outside the U.S., supplier declaration conformity was signed by a responsible party. Based on the ground in the U.S., is this a new requirement? No, it's not a new requirement, but yeah, those have to be signed. Somebody authorized to act on behalf of the company. And I haven't heard this. Somebody mentioned that they had heard that China's accept the MC from U.S. labs. I haven't heard that, but I will look into it and see what I can find out. And if I have any information, I'll include it in the slide deck at the end of the addendum, the section I'll add to it with any other new information I've gotten from the things going on this week. Well, thanks for attending today. I really appreciate y'all's interest. And if you have additional questions or I didn't answer your questions adequately, send me an email, or if you have a project you want to get working on, you can contact Washington Labs directly at the info@wll.com, or phone them up, or or go to the website. You can do application right from there if you'd like to. I'd like to plug the IEEE engineering organization. There's a couple of events coming up. If you're in the San Jose, San Francisco area, in May, there's going to be the Product Compliance Engineering Symposium. It's sponsored by the Product Safety Engineering Society, but it includes a lot of 3 days of presentations on EMC, product safety, wireless, medical products, industrial, environmental issues, environmental compliance, and as far as electronics goes. So that's a really good event. You can find out a lot more information from the website link provided there. I'll be there. And then at the MC Symposium, the U.S. version is going to be in Long Beach, California, just south of L.A., in end of July, beginning of August. There is an international symposium going on in Singapore in May. I think it's around the same time as the iSpice, but if you're like me, I couldn't figure out a justification for going to Singapore, so I'm not going to be there. I'll be at Long Beach. If you need more information on that, I work with both those committees, so you can use my IEEE address down here at the bottom, mmaynard@IEEE.org. And if you want to find out more about it or get more information that you can't find on the websites. Tell you about upcoming webinars. Next month, we're going to go over Middle East, some of the countries there. There's a Gulf States organization you've probably been hearing about. A lot of that's been implemented, so there's some new information out there. Then in June, we'll be going over Central America and the Caribbean countries, those around the Gulf of Mexico. And then July, we'll be going over South America. If you've got other, you can see the full schedule for the rest of the year out there at this web link here, but if there's other topics, international approval topics or countries you'd like to see covered, at the ones that I mentioned, we'll be getting a slide deck that will have all the, if you have any ideas for that. I appreciate your attendance today. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next month.